Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to an intellectual Splinter. Today, we're going to be doing something a bit interesting. Usually, I touch upon politics, philosophy, all that good stuff, maybe life stuff, maybe games, even, the usual. But today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Today, we're going to do history. I find history to be quite a fascinating subject. Because obviously a lot of people tend to forget the mistakes of the past, so we are kind of doomed to repeat them. So basically my idea behind this is that I want to learn from what happens in history and affected culture up to today, basically. And what better ways to start than Julius Caesar? Now, I don't know much about Julius Caesar before, watching the Netflix show. Which I highly recommend, which is called The Roman Empire. And then I did some research on my own about the character. Not a character person. He's a real person. Okay, he's a real person, guys. Sorry. And today, we are going to be looking over one of the most fascinating, the most brilliant, and the most popular historical figure there ever was. Ladies and gentlemen, today is Julius Caesar, based or cringe. So first off, just like many great people, he was hunted down in his younger years. There is basically this list of people in the Roman Republic that other people kind of wanted to kill. I don't remember exactly which type of people per se, but this similar thing happened to Caligulus, if you know his history well, which I will go over later at a different period of time. But know that back then, putting people on a list in the middle of the city and trying to kill them was kind of normal, which is a little bit scary. So the second thing he did was fought some pirates. Obviously, he went far away from Rome because they were, trying to kill him. So he went as far away as possible, but he ended up on his way fighting a bunch of pirates. In fact, he was taken hostage by pirates, and then he broke free and slaughtered all of them, starting his reputation as a great general and a great leader in battle, which is something that we'll see is a current trend for his whole life, basically. And at this point, he joined the Roman army. Now, obviously, this was a very good move behalf on him, because in the Roman army, if you are well trained and a general, and you can actually end up making quite a few powerful friends and end up being in a powerful place yourself. So starting off in the Roman army was actually a really smart choice, because then you can work your way up the hierarchy. At this point in time, when Julius got out of the Roman army, it started to lead into more dangerous territory, mostly because of two people, Crassus and Pompas. Crassus and Pompas did not like each other, not one bit. They didn't like working together. They didn't like being a part of a greater thing. They simply hated each other. So Crassus was mostly known for his, I believe, the most elite, type of wealthy people. So he had his connections to have him have power. So one half, you have Crassus, which takes off the half of the Roman Republic, and then there's Pompas. Pompas, which is a veteran leader much like Julius Caesar, but Pompas has a lot of influence over the Roman army because he was a veteran. So you have these two opposing sides kind of going at it. So Caesar saw this moment and thought to himself, what if I brought them together? What if Crassus and Pompas were to work with each other? And what would happen is that Julius Caesar saw this chance to become the consul. Now, in case you don't know, in Roman politics, the consul, like a video game? No. Has the most amount of power. It's basically the highest power you could ever have. So he used this as an advantage between Crassus and Pompas to gain the upper hand, working with the two of them to try and create a better Roman life. Obviously, his time in council was a bit strange, to say the least. Julius Caesar, when he wanted to get his way and trying to get people to vote for him and trying to get people to function with him in his society, he tended to, let's just say, be a bit of a bully. And by bully, I mean sent a bunch of assassins to people, beat them up, and then have them run away, and then that being a sign of fear, so hopefully they'll support him. It was kind of crazy. So Julius used this chance to basically become what essentially was the most powerful man, and he decided to use even more means to try and intimidate his way to the top. Roman society was pretty messed up, so they realized they didn't want him as consul anymore. So they sent him off. They realized that they were going to do something against him. So Caesar thought ahead. So he gathered a Roman Empire without the permission of the Senate, and then went straight to Gaul. Now, just to let you know, in Roman society, conquering other lands was kind of a cool thing. For some reason, a lot of people were like, yeah, more land and whatever, right? Because those were the good old days. So they then seek this opportunity to start invading other areas, and then once those areas will be captured, if you come home to Rome with tons of captured, people, slaves, and of course land, then you will be highly rewarded in the society, not only by public support, but by donations and by other people that he's worked with in the upper echelons of the society of Romans. So Caesar's time in Gaul was pretty interesting. He took many years and spread it out far and wide, but the Gaulians, the Gauls? The Gauls, we'll go with that. So the Gauls were kind of, to put it lightly, a bit savage. They didn't have a traditional army or soldiers or clan or groups. They just didn't have a functioning one government. They only were kind of working amongst themselves. And this made it fairly easy for Caesar to take and win a lot of territory. So they realized that this was a massive problem. The Gauls hated the Romans. So one man brought them all together. This is where Vercingetorix, these names, man. I can't do it, these names, man. So Vercingetorix fought hard. He was a very good soldier, but just in general, he wasn't enough to beat Julius Caesar. So Caesar found a way to basically corner them. Well, not corner them per se, but get them in a nice little circle. So Vercingetorix and Caesar knew that this was coming to an end, mostly because the resources were short. I forget if it's Vercingetorix or Caesar that got rid of the resources, but I'm pretty sure it's Vercingetorix because he wanted to play the long game. They both wanted to play the long game. None of them were making any decisions. So Caesar came up with a plan. This plan, this ultimate godlike plan, alright, started to build a wall. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He started to build a wall. That's right. Trump would have loved it. He built a wall around them, basically trying to make sure that they don't escape and would wait, and then just, obviously just take them out when need be. So, this was a very smart plan. However, Vercingetorix realized that he needed more people. So, before the wall was built, he made sure to send for more soldiers. Caesar kind of found himself in a bit of a problem here. If he goes in completely, he could end up killing a lot of his armies, and then the next army would just roll over them. And if he waits there for too long, he could be attacked on both sides, which meant that this could be a very, very, very bad war and would end up losing. So Caesar was like, you know what, man? Another one. Let's do it again. Let's build another wall. And it's like, bro, you and your walls, man, they're cool. I get them. But, why? But he was playing a very smart play here. He then put his soldiers, it's hard to elaborate with the way that I'm doing, but think of a circle and then a circle outside that circle. So there was a very limited amount of space. So he had to fight the Gauls on two different fronts. So the reinforcements came in and they started to attack them. Now, Caesar decided, yeah, if I let them win like this or let them fight like this, they will win. So Caesar came up with the idea to have his armies sneak around where the reinforcements were coming in and just start ripping them apart. So he then silently took them out. They were attacking the wall, didn't realize what was behind them, and bam, slaughtered the reinforcements. And with that, Vercingetorix realized that it was over. There was no more winning. So Vercingetorix gave up, and sadly, he became a slave. And he got killed later on, but Vercingetorix's story and his fight in Gaul was kind of sad to see, especially considering that Caesar thought his way through it. So the Senate, after this all happens, know that he will be probably the most prided person in Roman history, mostly because he conquered Gaul. Oh, speaking of which, before we go any further, Caesar decided to come up with this idea of reports. These, weird notepad descriptions of the ongoing battle in Gaul. And this made him look extremely good. He painted himself in a really good picture. And because of that, the Roman people were really starting to love him. On the other hand, the Senate, not so much. Because the Senate wanted him to stand trial for obviously taking a bunch of armies and going away, even if it had a good result. Caesar knew if he steps back into Rome, he would be put on trial, and let's face it, the trial would probably just be death. So, yeah, not preferable. But on the other hand, if he brings his army with him and just overthrows the government, then we have a whole new problem on our hands, or where he becomes another civil war. Which brings me to the civil war between Caesar and Pompas. So Pompas realized that he was marching his own way home, and he was like, okay, you can have Rome, whatever, we're leaving, skabooskies, right? Pompas then started to head out and tried to gather as many armies as he could. Caesar saw the bait of the Roman people, and he didn't want to take it, so the Roman people were kind of in chaos without a proper leader or anything really. So it kind of fell into savage hands, especially with a civil war going on, so the government is kind of up in the air. So the Roman people did not like this one bit, but for Pompas and Caesar, it was definitely worth it. Now, let's back up a bit. We've talked about Pompas, obviously Caesar, but where's Crassus? That, my friend, is a good question, because Caesar and Pompas, as we all know, are military generals, right? They have experience in the field. Crassus, on the other hand, does not. And if you know where this is going, you know where this is going, because Crassus was like, you know what, I'll take over a place in like Asia or something, right? So he sends there, he goes there, right? And he's like, I'm here, guys, we're gonna beat you, and then loses instantaneously in one of the worst defeats we have ever seen. And then as a cherry on top, Crassus dies in the worst way possible, like an utter fool. He dies because they poured melted gold down his throat, and he dies that way. One of the most powerful people in Roman society, and he ended up losing just like that. Crassus, if he lived, could have been a very interesting scenario. Would he side with Pompas or Caesar, or maybe do his own thing? In fact, Crassus could have used this opportunity between in the Civil War to actually reestablish the Roman Republic right now and could take influence. But he decided not to do that and went with the most foolish decision, and because of that foolish decision, he dies. So, big whoop. So Pompas and Caesar are at it. So basically, what happens is that Pompas gets a bunch of his ships and a bunch of his armies together and sails across to some island. I don't know. I don't remember, guys. Remembering all this stuff is hard, okay? But basically, he was gathering as much army as possible. And Caesar was obviously gathering his army as well. So, seeing that he's out of reach, he realizes, okay, we need to build boats, like now. So they head into their inventory, and they were like, this took a few months. It's not like Minecraft where you kind of like get a crafting table and then it appears. But it took time. And it can only carry half of his army. So, Caesar took this chance to get on the boat with half of his army and sail across, even though this could be dangerous, very dangerous. But there was no time to waste. So he gets across and he waits for his other armies. So here's kind of the sad part about Pompas. Pompas knew that Caesar was coming. In fact, he knew that they were on the same island or land, or I don't remember, guys. I'm sorry. But basically, Pompas knew that he was already across. So instead of trying to attack him one-on-one, he starts to talk to him. Now you might be thinking, why would he do such a thing? And that's because Pompas was scared. Pompas didn't have the military experience as much as Caesar did. Well, at least Pompas was kind of outdated. It was been a long while before he's actually seen in combat. So he obviously didn't want to take his chances, so he tried to work something out between him and Caesar. So instead, Pompas goes up to him, he's like, hey bro, can you like not do this? Can we like go home in peace and stuff? And it's like, why don't you surrender, bro, dab? And then they leave. Pompas lets him get away to like let him think about it basically. And Pompas went with the worst opportunity, because if he just stepped in with his army, he could have ended up slaughtering Caesar, but because his fear took over him, he ended up losing the battle. So anyway, Caesar then came over with even more, the other half of his men. They ended up fighting, and basically, even though Caesar had a full army and Pompas had more, there was still a likelihood that Caesar would somehow come out on top. And you see, like Caesar always does, he came up with a plan. Caesar knew that Pompas would use his like chariot squads. You know the horsey from chess? Yeah, he got like a whole posse of them, right? And he started to charge them forward, and they head in a straight line. But Caesar came up with the idea to have a swinging door effect, basically. So he took a fraction of his army. Yet again, this is another point in time where he's using his army to circle around, and he kind of swings around, not entirely behind them, but like at an angle, which meant that they were being attacked by both sides, and the cavalry kind of fell apart. Big sad. So Pompas, like a fool, ended up losing and went to Egypt instead. He knew that he had connections with people in Egypt, and decided, hey, you know what, Egypt, you guys have been my homies for a while now. Why don't you come with me and we can take on Caesar together? And he died. Yeah, it's a bit sudden, but the current Egyptian king, or emperor, no, king, right? It's king. I don't know. I don't know much about Egypt. He was ruled by like a 17-year-old or like a 13, I don't know. He was like a teenager, and he killed him, and he presented it to Caesar. Caesar, at least to some people's eyes, would see this as a good thing. But Caesar really didn't like this. It made him feel uncomfortable. Yeah, no shit. Of course. Caesar had known this guy for a long time, even though they have been enemies. To see him disgracefully with his head out, completely chopped off, he obviously found it disturbing. The reason why this Egyptian king wanted to get on the good side of Caesar was because he was in a war between him and Cleopatra. Obviously, if you know Cleopatra, you know which side is going to win, and obviously they ended up winning. I don't know a whole lot about the fight between Egypt, but Caesar ended up winning a lot of them and then went home. He was like, oh, one more thing. Cleopatra and Caesar kind of had a thing going on. Like Caesar was literally like covering up his balding head, but he still managed to get laid with Cleopatra, which apparently people describe as being very pretty, and he fell for it. Damn. If only there were femboys in the... I'm joking. Okay, let's move on. Caesar then took this chance when he went home to establish himself back into power, essentially making himself dictator for 10 years. Now, obviously, we all know we don't like dictators. Dictators bad. I know us in Western countries are like, yeah, dictators kind of cringe, bro. And it is. But to be fair, the government was kind of torn apart. Like, the Senate was not what it used to be. The people were not as they used to be. Any of the upper echelons were not what they used to be. Everybody was fragmented and not well, and the government just wasn't functioning. And because of that, making himself dictator and just being able to make as many good choices as possible for the country is actually a really smart play here. And let's get this right. Even though he's a dictator, like I said, dictator is bad, we all know that, but he ended up helping a lot of the Roman citizens along the way. He made a lot of good decisions, like in particular food, water, jobs. He provided that all to them. And like I said, good thing. However, we get to the next thing. Caesar liked this power, obviously, and when you get power that powerful, you always tend to be corrupted by it. And this obviously held true with Caesar. He tried to extend himself as being the next ruler for basically ever, and thought of himself as the next ruler. Now, this is where we get to the tricky part. Let's talk about Brutus. Brutus is somebody that has been along this story, but I haven't quite talked about yet. Brutus has kind of been known for this betrayer, but we'll get to that in a second. First, Brutus knew Caesar kind of at a young age, since Brutus's mother had a thing going with Caesar. I know Caesar gets around a lot. He tends to do that. But Brutus also fought on the side of Pompas. He was on his side, but Caesar spared him. Now, this is either because he sees him as a son, or he seems to have favorability, or maybe compassion, but I doubt that last one. But he sees something in Brutus that lets him keep. So Brutus works his way up into the upper echelons of the Senate. He ends up becoming one of the more powerful people there. And there, they decide to plan a a plan to kill Caesar. And obviously we can say that this is a betrayal, but to be honest, Caesar was becoming a dictator. He literally wanted to see the end of the Republic. he wanted to make himself permanently in power and his generations onward to have that same thing. So Brutus and many of the other Senate members got him in a room, isolated, and just started stabbing him. They just went ooh ooh ooh, right? And then I don't know what that was. He's bleeding everywhere, and he's like, "No, Brutus, how could you have done this?" And then he kind of dies, and then his inventory is kind of all messed up. But you get what I mean. He died. After this is where we see the cracks to start to show. After this, the Romans became an empire. Because of this one character, one person, Julius Caesar, setting himself up as a dictator, they didn't want to see, the Roman people didn't want to see the Senate go on anymore because they saw them as corrupt, and they loved Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was beloved by his people, and because Brutus killed him, even though it was for the right decisions, people turned against him. Brutus then later commits Sudoku on himself in the middle of battle, but obviously we all know Brutus, I think, was really trying to make the right decision. And I think that if most people were put in that scenario, I think everyone would have wanted Caesar dead, because that was the only solution to stopping a dictator at this point. But the Roman people didn't see it that way. So in many ways, the fall of the Republic can be attributed to one man. It can also be attributed to the people so lusting for more power, for more land, for a dictator even. Even if it made their lives good, they wanted a dictator and him to be in power basically for the rest of his life. And because of that, we see the true flaw of populism and the crowd. So we have come to the end. Was Julius Caesar based or cringe? It's a complicated one. If we're talking about like his pure battle IQ and his wit and his lust for women, I guess, Julius Caesar is definitely based. He comes up with one of the most intelligent people ever to be living. However, the cringe part would be the fact that, he is a dictator. He just wanted power. He even threatened people with thugs and other forms of torturous stuff, civil wars, and of course becoming a dictator in his own right. All that stuff is cringe. So his motives were cringe, but the guy himself, in terms of his abilities, were quite based. So yeah, it's a mix between the two. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I plan to do more history stuff because history stuff's pretty cool and interesting. But yeah, that'll be it. Peace.